Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would chat with you guys a little bit about training volume. And up in the background, I'm going to have the unedited clips of just the chest and tricep portion of a workout I did a while back. And this really highlights what we're talking about with hypertrophy and training volumes, because this was an ME day, and I ramped up to a heavy paused triple, with fairly heavy chains on the bench, right? Which I would count as one set, one work set for pecs and front delts. I did 3 sets of 10 on pause bench, 3 sets of 10 on flat dumbbell presses, and then 3 sets of 10 with tricep extensions. And so this is a perfect example of showing what we mean for training volumes, because again, when you take out all these studies where junk volume is used, and again, people not training anywhere near failure, what is it that we find? We're finding studies that from individual workouts, 5 to 10 sets produces maximum hypertrophy. And that's been pretty consistent in the scientific literature. Well done studies, right? Well done studies where they're taking experienced lifters in these volume studies. These are not novices, right? These were intermediate and advanced lifters. And when they took their sets to failure, and keeping in mind, most of the studies show that stopping 1 rep short of failure produces just as much growth as failure. So we could extrapolate the data from those other studies and say, okay, so these were sets done to failure or to momentary failure or to form breakdown because of their big movements. They found that from a single workout, when you exceed 10 sets, that muscle growth is reduced consistently. And what I mean is, no, you don't get diminished returns. People are like, oh, so you mean there's a diminished return? No, diminished returns means you still get something. They simply gained less muscle. And it's because if you're training actually hard on your sets, you do more than about 10 sets for a muscle group, your recovery is impeding. There's a lot of things that occur at the cellular level that would explain this. It cuts into your growth time. This is the best hypothesis they have. It cuts into your muscle growth time, the extra recovery time, and it offsets any training stimulus benefit you got. So you actually gain less muscle from the first 5 to 10 sets also. It's not that they didn't stimulate growth. They did. It's that you didn't have enough of a growth window to utilize all of it because you spent more time recovering. And here's the thing. For some muscle groups and in some people, even 5 sets produced maximum growth. And I want to be clear on that. So even doing up to 10 didn't automatically get more growth than 5. In many cases it did. But what we also need to understand, it wasn't large amounts of difference. It's not like they gained 30 or 40% more muscle from doing those extra 5 sets. That was a diminished return. Going from 5 to 10 sets seems to produce a diminished return in hypertrophy. It produced a diminished return. Okay. For base, if you really needed to be efficient, you do 5 sets of muscle group. And here's the other thing. We start finding exceeding twice a week doesn't increase growth either. So I generally recommend upper lower with 5 to 10 work sets per muscle group twice a week. But in this example, what do we get? Well, about 7 sets for chest. Why? Because the ramp to the heavy triple did what? It was a set. 3 sets of paused, fairly wide grip benching. 3 sets of dumbbell presses. Right? That's 7 work sets. Now people say, well, what about the tricep end? Well, we know from most of the studies that triceps do grow from all these movements. They produce hypertrophy, but not as much as extensions do. Therefore, we would count them as half sets, right? We know that based upon most of the literature we have. All these presses produce tricep growth, but not maximum tricep growth. So for our purposes, we would count all these presses as half sets for triceps. And that's fair, that's reasonable. So what did we get? between 3 and 4 sets for triceps before we added extensions. The extensions take us up to 6 to 7. Where are we at in terms of that growth window? Somewhere between 5 and 10 is optimal. Keeping in mind, in a few studies, they have found that even 5 produced maximum growth in some of the muscle groups involved. But here's the thing. All of my sets are within 1 rep of failure, right? These are about 1 rep in reserve in general. If you watch how my weight slows, the last one is a little grindy and hard. Means I have maybe 1 rep left in the tank. Some of these I may not have a rep in the tank. Okay, some of them I don't have a rep in reserve at all. That last one was all I had. I would have failed the next rep. Some of them I had one in reserve, but we're in that optimal intensity there. And I hate to use that word, it's a bodybuilder term for that. We're getting very close to failure. And some of these they were grindy enough I probably wouldn't have gotten another rep without cheating. This is maximum hypertrophy for chest, front delts, triceps. And we have enough movement variation. What is it we always say too? You want a couple different angles. Well, throwing aside the heavy triple on the front end, because it's its own movement, we got 2 different chest, front delt exercises that also work the tricep slightly differently. And then we got a stretch position tricep exercise to hit that long head a little bit harder. Okay. You are unlikely to grow by doing any more than what I did here because they were hard sets. They're hard sets. We can make the argument that with enough drugs involved, we can get more, but here's the other thing. Even guys on drugs don't always guarantee more. It's just they can handle more volume, and in some cases, more volume has an effect with the gear. But we've also seen people who, if they train really hard, get away with lower volumes and still become some of the most massive men on the face of the planet. I think it's just a case that when people become enhanced and their degree of enhancement gives them more wiggle room. But you would still potentially see maximized true muscle growth from this, because again, we could make the case that maybe some of that isn't real muscle growth, even with stuff involved. Right? Are we getting real myofibrillar hypertrophy from it? Or is it transient storage factors that fade when you come off? But again, I digress back over to the point. These sort of training volumes, when you are pushing sets to this limit, this is about as much as you're really going to produce maximum growth from. Anything else you're doing, you're just hoping to get a little more, and it may not pay off. If you're drug-free, it may produce less growth. Just be aware of that. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.